The supreme leader of the Orthobros is a Russian Orthodox walking clown emoji named Jay Dyer.
I wanted to get into a little bit, if you don't mind, like your mindset going into part of the mechanics of debate, because I think there are like, I make this analogy sometimes between like MMA and debate. I mean, you'd think that they're polar opposites, but really you can't really enjoy watching MMA unless you kind of know what's going on there, especially with something like as technical as like jujitsu. And I know here we can make a insert gay joke about Cleve here for being sick at jujitsu, but two sweaty guys on top of each other. There you go. But like, unless you know, like, oh, he put his ankle, like he hooked his leg through that shifts his center of gravity. Like, unless you're aware of that, you can't really enjoy the technical nature of what's going on. So like when it comes to like an opening statement, for instance, if we could go through like the main parts of a debate, like what's your mindset going into an opening statement? Like, what are you trying to do? And like, what are your goals? Because like I shared recently your opening statement against Muslim Lantern, which was like insane because there was like so much energy behind it and so substantive and comprehensive. But that's not just like something that happens overnight. Like before, you had already debated Shabir Ali before that, who has a doctoral level degree in like Muslim theology or whatever it was. Sheikh Azrar Rashid, you debated Jake, you debated Daniel Hakikachu at that point. So you already have the substance like in your head and you know what the proper evidences are. And the result of that is like, oh, after you've done many of these, you know, it's a bit more stream of consciousness where you can put together like this knockout opening statement, because it's not the first time you've done it before, right? You have years of preparation before this. But it's like, overall, what are your thoughts for like opening statements?
Well, in that example, I would say that it was also within a time frame when I had been studying monarchical Trinitarianism pretty heavily. So all of that was super fresh in my mind. All the Cappadocian stuff was fresh in my mind. So that made it a lot easier to just spit it out. I was probably a little energized too, because that all happened last minute because Andrew left that debate and Sneeko reached out to me and said, "Hey, will you come fill in?" And it's a big enough channel at that time. I didn't want to say no. I was like, yeah, sure. So I was a little excited with the fact that, you know, I think even then Sneeko had at least 1 million followers. So it was going to be a large, you know, a lot of views. So my first thought was to just kind of spit out as concisely and clearly as I could monarchical Trinitarianism to kind of undercut the possibility of Muslim Lantern using the go-to standard low-tier Muslim arguments of, you know, how does Jesus say Father greater, right? That's one of their classic things. So I wanted the opening statement, and I think this is a good trick I try to use a lot. If you can't always do this, but if you know that an opponent, you can sometimes guess the lines of argument they're going to use. If you can, in your opening statement, undercut a bunch of their arguments, and if you're going first, it's going to be even automatically weaker for them because their opening statement's going to have a bunch of stuff that you've already you know, pull the rug out from under. So that's a good strategy if you're going first in a debate. And even if you're not, you can still do that because let's say Muslim Lantern went first and he said a bunch of stuff that I didn't expect. And then I do my opening statement. My opening statement that has things that anticipate could still work because he might go back to those later on. So, and usually with Muslims, unless you know, are dealing with some unique outlier that has, you know, crazy, hyper specific metaphysical arguments, which is rare. Usually they're going to use the same type of stuff because most of these people are lazy. Most people are not reading the books. I know that, for example, in the case, I will say for Jake, I think Jake did do reading. I don't know exactly what and how far, but at least Jake was willing to get the Orthodox books and show them on screen, although they didn't look like they were read, but at least he got them. But like most people are super lazy. They're not going to buy any books. They're going to go to a website and copy and paste, you know, or now ask ChatGPT. It used to be just go to the website and like, you know, find, you know, Muslims, for example, they have a history of going to Jehovah's Witness websites and then just copy pasting Jehovah's Witness arguments and just repeating them. And it's like, that's so lazy, dude. Like,
Yeah.
and again, maybe we should do a little preface. So number one thing to do for debates is you need to, here's my rules, my principles of debate. Number one, you need to go into a debate wanting to lose. And I mean that seriously. Why? Because the goal is not this guy versus the other. It's the goal is truth. And it doesn't matter whether your opponent's interested in what's true. As long as you care about what's true, you have the upper hand, right? A lot of times your opponents are not good faith. They won't care what's true. So if you have the advantage of, I only care what's true, you're going to win because you're committed to what's true, even if you're wrong. So if you're wrong at a point in the debate, you got to be honest and say, you know what, you're right about that. Now, technically speaking, that shouldn't cost you the whole debate unless you're wrong about the premise of the debate. But
Right.
you know, there are a lot of times in debate. I remember, I think in one of the Ibarra debates or the Ibarra debate, I got a point wrong. But I don't think that means that I lost the whole debate because my argument didn't hinge on that point. It was, and everybody's going to have this in debates. You're going to make a mistake. You're going to reference a wrong counsel. You're going to reference a wrong name. You're going to get a date wrong. That happens to everybody. And that's not a huge deal unless it's, you know, something huge or significant. But point being is that number one rule is you want to be concerned with what's true over everything else. Number two rule is you want to try to know your opponent's argument better than them if you can. Now, if you're debating somebody on their PhD thesis, you're probably not going to know the subject better than them. But if you're debating a Muslim on, you know, Allah, is God one or many, you know, this kind of a thing. Well, I want to know his Aqidah. I want to know the school of Islam that he comes from. I want to know, you know, what his Sunni position on the attributes and the body of God is. Does Allah have a body? Is he of the Salafi tradition? Right. So you want to try to know your opponent's position as best you can. And Bonson used to say this, and I think it's a great idea, even though in today's debate climate is probably not going to work. But he used to say that you need to be able to state your opponent's argument to their satisfaction. If you can do that, you've got another upper hand, because most people go into a debate only caring about themselves. They don't care about what's true. They don't care about stating your argument to your satisfaction. If you're able to do that, that makes you way more effective because you can demonstrate that, no, I understand your argument. Even though I don't agree with it, I understand it. That's why it was so, I think, effective when we ask all those Muslims, can you restate the Islamic dilemma? I don't believe it. I do not believe Islamic. I know you don't believe it. I just want to know, can you restate the argument? I don't believe that argument. No. Okay. Yeah, we know. But so you've got to be able to, I think it was Aristotle. Bonson's just expressing what Aristotle said. An intelligent man can express an idea and explain it without even necessarily agreeing with it. So those are some of the key points. So long, that was way too long of an answer. I apologize.
No, you're good. But I think that that point on being able to admit when you get something wrong, like something I mention all the time, like especially when you are being cross-examined, and this is a little bit further ahead in the debate, like you really want to kind of keep it to like yes, no, or I don't.
Yeah, this was a strategy.
Lewis
brought this up to when I'm being cross-examined, I don't want to say a whole bunch of stuff because the more I talk, the more I could potentially be trapped.
Yeah.
Be hung with it. So yeah, absolutely.
More things they can pull onto. Now, when your opponent is giving their opening statement, I'm very curious about what you're going to say to this. What are you doing when your opponent is giving their opening statement?
I am, every time I'm listening to an opening statement, you'll notice I'm drawing. I am drawing a caricature of that person. I'm not doing. I'm drawing them with a pig face. No, I'm writing each contradiction or mistake I hear.
Thank you. Yeah, I tell people this all the time. I'm like, if you see the other side like giving their opening statement and somebody like has turned their camera off or is like not taking notes, you have to be taking notes because you're not going to remember everything that they say in their opening statement.
The other thing I've noticed too is, and this is what is the quick thinking part of debates, I've never had a debate where I got through every problem I listed in either an opening statement or a rebuttal or whatever. So you have to very quickly choose which are the ones you think are the big hitters, right? So if I hear a Muslim dude opening statement with like 10 contradictions, I got to quickly choose.
Yeah, pick the most devastating ones. Yeah, that's right. Now when it comes so in the rebuttal period, you're going to bring up those like the main contradictions.
Right.
Are you really concerned with like, unless the other side, unless they have something like terribly devastating? I mean, at this point, like you're very experienced in debate and you're probably familiar with most of the critiques you could get. Uh, how are you dealing with your opponent's rebuttal to your opening?
Usually I'm treating a rebuttal the exact same way as I would treat an opening statement. I'm going to listen and I'm going to jot down the big points that I think are a mistake. But what often happens in debates, at least in my experience, is let's say in the opening statements, I write down 5 things that were major problems in what they said. When I rebut him, I highlight, let's say 2. Okay. It usually ends up being a situation where the next phase of the debate ends up being where we're going back and forth on one of these. So that oftentimes ends up occupying a lot of the time. And then usually debates end up, for me, being 1 or 2 topics for the whole time, because I want to pin them down on a point and show that they never resolved this issue. And the number one thing that many people do in debates is immediately try to get away from the thing that they're pinned down on. So that's why you want to highlight a couple things that you don't want to let them get away from. Although you might have to, in some cases, make a judgment call and decide, okay, you know what, let's just move on from that one, right? For example, if it seems like you've illustrated to the point of death that they're not answering this question, in that case, it might be prudent to move on to the next big thing to get them on, right? So you might want to sometimes let it go, but I try to extend it as long as I can if I can demonstrate that that person is intentionally obfuscating to not be pinned down on a major issue, and none of the answers that they've given allow them to escape being pinned down. And then I might move on to the next big one and then do the exact same thing.
I think,
but one thing I never do is allow people, because this is what everybody tries to do. They'll throw up every bit of smoke and mirror, every bit of rabbit trail, every red herring to go into all these other million things. And the reason people think I'm so mean is usually because I'm saying, oh, you never answered this problem. You did all these other things, which are a way to get away from this. So I keep bringing them back. And that's what people think is mean and so, annoying about debating me, is I don't let you off the hook. Now you're going to come back to this point. You're going to resolve this. Then we might move on.
Yeah. And I guess that's like, we can move forward to the cross exam now. Like there are a few factors that I want to, that I'm always considering in the cross exam that I think you are too. Like one of them is control, which I think you've been alluding to a bit here, was like, no, if they give like a sentence already and I can tell that their answer is not responsive to my question, I'm just going to interrupt and bring them back to the question, right? So control is very important, but like overall, it seems like you said you focus on maybe like 1, 2, or 3 things, like the major things, the major defeaters.
Only because they'll go off into everything to get away from those.
Yeah. So I guess like, what's your mindset going into a cross exam, and like, what things are you like, what factors are you considering?
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight one of those 2, and it might be more, it might be 3 or 4, right? Because sometimes people, for example, in the Jake debate, I remember there was a couple times where I thought I had a really strong point, and although I don't think Jake had a good answer, Jake is cunning enough at certain points to be able to say, let's say something like, I don't even remember if he specifically did this, but so there was something like this where he can say, well, I'm not really committal on that position. I have my position. Ibn Taymiyyah says this. I'm not really committed either way on that. And it's like, So sometimes there might be a curveball where a person has a way out, and it could put you in a position to where you could keep pursuing it, but it might look like to the audience that you're just pushing on a thing that doesn't have much behind it.
Right.
Even if you might have a good point, like there are times where people can kind of wiggle out of stuff. So what I would do if I sense that the person could conceivably, even if it's just the audience's perspective, even if I know they're not really getting out of this, if I think the audience might perceive them as getting out of it, I might move on to the next kill shot because it might not be worth pursuing. The other thing too is to not pursue. This is a temptation I think a lot of people might have is, let's say you caught somebody on something very minor. Do I want to hammer home the major kill shot, or do I want to hammer home something that they totally got wrong that's minor? I would probably go with the kill shot over the minor, because even though I might be able to score a point, I would rather use the time within the debate to go after the kill shot and try to nail that over a minor point. So focus on, the kill shots for sure, and try to keep it to a few of those, because the simpler you can keep it in terms of subjects without going all over. Like I remember in the Neil the Gnostic debate, right? So we started talking about Trinity and one and many, and then Neil's like going off into ancient texts about Gnostic groups, and it's like, and that's not going to go anywhere, because okay, so there's all these Gnostic groups. Well, see, this long line of argumentation somehow proves that the Old Testament's not real, because, and it's like, it's just a red herring.
Right.
And that's, I think, was to get away from the stronger points where Neil was making some very fundamental mistakes about how something can't be one and many at the same time. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
that was one of the debates where I think you insisted, where like, I don't know how many times like we have to go through the, is this one thing, or is this three things?
Yeah, I think when he realized he was making some mistakes, then it turned into, well, what are you going to do with the scholars that say that the Qumran community of the Essenes and blah, blah, blah. It's like, the other thing too is don't get into competing scholar claims. That's a big trap, just because it's not that you can't bring in evidences or cite scholars. You can as evidences, but that's really all they function as. So yeah, it's fine to say, most of today's a lot of Jewish scholarship today believes that the Old Testament references to God are not Unitarian. There's pretty significant evidences amongst Jewish scholars today of multiple hypostases or, multiplicity in Yahweh. That's a good evidence to use. It doesn't prove the Trinity. It doesn't disprove Islam, right? It just demonstrates that there is some academic attestation to this position. And it's also useful to cite the Jewish source, obviously, because they're not interested in proving Christianity. So but I would not get bogged down on throwing a bunch of academic claims back and forth. And a lot of evidentialists, a lot of scholars get really bogged down in this, because they think, well, if I just pile up, here's 15 scholars agreeing with this position, and it's like, it's a waste of time. So it's also kind of a waste of time. I mean, you can prove text, but it's also kind of a waste of time to throw a bunch of verses at people, machine gun style. Those are all kind of low tier, kind of noob level mistakes. But I'm sorry.
It's more like here's this principle, and then if you really want some support for it, here are the verses or academics that support the principle. But I think like just generally you see this like evidentialist, like of course you need evidences,
right?
But evidentialism is like kind of a boomer style of apologetics that's like kind of going out of fashion, or just like honestly you just can't keep up with the worldview apologetics that we see now. And I was talking to my chat, some people in my chat even mentioned that recently the Connectleys debated Cora, the Muslim lady apologist, and Libiano, the Orthodox Muslim, and it was just devastating for the Connectleys. Like they did horrible. I don't know if you watched it, but
every debate I've seen the knuckleheads in, they've done terrible. So I don't know why they thought it would be a good idea to debate any Muslim, because debate is not their strong suit. I don't know what their strong suit is. It's certainly not debate.
Maybe preaching at college campuses or something.
That's I think the preaching is not debate. They're very
different.
Very different things. And a lot of people think that preaching is debate. People that come on the streams, even a lot of Muslims, they think that debating is like you just spit out all of your views. That's not.
Maybe this is a good talk. Can you say what is not talk about what is not debate for a moment?
So debating is not arguing, right? So you're going to have arguments with your wife. And an argument might have some features that overlap with the debate because
You're
you're
gonna
going
bring
back
evidences,
and, yeah, you're
maybe
going back and
text
forth.
messages.
There's evidences, but that's not what. So a debate is a formal, structured back and forth that usually includes. I mean, I think people know the formal debate structure, but it doesn't have to be formal to also be a debate. You could have a civil exchange. You know, we had, for example, David Riley, the SSPX guy on, and that was an exchange that almost was kind of a debate, but not exactly. And we've had plenty civil, open back and forth with people for. We had that guy that's buddies with Tim Gordon, I forget his name, but the Roman Catholic guy that came on, and we had a back and forth about the papacy and geopolitical power about a year ago. So it was a debate, but it wasn't a structured debate. So you can have a conversational debate. You can also have a blood sports style, back and forth like I had with Tim Gordon on Timcast. So, all of those things I think could qualify as debates, but strictly speaking, you have a thesis and you have a for affirmation or negation. It doesn't have to be that. It can be also, uh, orthodoxy is good because of this, no is bad because of this. But usually you've got, some degree of back and forth. I don't like debates that don't have cross examinations because they're very boring. A lot of people are scared of cross examinations.
I was going to bring that up because it seems like a lot of the debates nowadays, it's just like 5-minute opening, 60-minute dialogue. And there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to get your questions out or make your points or really be able to corner the other side on something and demonstrate your point to the audience. Like, I'm a huge advocate of like, keep the cross exams. They're necessary and they're fair because you and the other side, they both get the same amount of time to ask their questions.
Yeah. Again, that's the thing. Like, if you don't have that, then, and I'm okay at times with it. It doesn't really bother me, but because I'm a very aggressive kind of debater. But if you're not an aggressive type of person, then the 60-minute open discussion would probably not benefit you well, because a person who is aggressive,
you're gonna get steamrolled.
Sam Shamoon will be, yapping 90 miles an hour.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that kind of favors certain types of personalities, but I do like, again, it needs to have some form of cross-examination, because you really need to show, errors in the person's position, and both sides need the power to interrupt.
Right.
And because everybody bitches in a debate, he's interrupting me. Well, there needs to be those phases in the debate to where I have 5 minutes to interrupt you and to say, you're not answering the question. Can you come back to this? You're filibustering, you're yapping. And then you have the same ability to do that. So you can do that to me too. That's only fair. But a lot of people are scared of that, and they don't want that in their debate.
Yeah. Father Deacon Ananias makes a good point in the chat here. He says, you don't pull out $100 bills. That's true. And you're 2v2 with Dr. Dougherty. I mean, how many times have you been challenged to an actual fight in a supposedly gentlemanly debate?
Actually, more than you would expect. I've been punched in debates, so Father Deacon was there for that.
When did you get punched in a debate? Do you want to share the story? Or?
I don't. That's so funny. At a monastery.
What happened?
So the first Sophia conference was that I went to was 2019, I think. And at that time, it was at the Holy Angels Monastery in San Antonio. And so Dr. Bradshaw, I think, was there, and Father Hans was there, FDA was there. A bunch of people I don't remember were there. And there was a certain ethics professor that was there. That I didn't know this guy. It's the first time I met him. And we were just conversing. We'd all arrived. We're all sort of newly there, kind of in the mess hall, so to speak, where everybody eats. And we were just all sort of sitting around chatting. And I said something. Yeah, I'm going to be presenting a paper I wrote on tag, some years ago, blah, blah, blah. And this person took issue with the idea that you could do a tag argument. Well, I'm here to present that paper. I think you can. This got more and more heated, more and more escalation. This guy said, you had better leave my presence or you will regret it. I said, I will not leave your presence because you're not going to do anything. And that escalated even further. And so what happened was I did decide I would turn and not engage in this. But as I turned, and this guy had all of his like professor book bag stuff on his arm, he like decided to go for a punch, but it missed, and so it was more like it hit me back here, and it was a push punch. So he push punched me, but he was like a big kind of Viking-ish beer belly dude. So he push punched me, and I went tumbling over a fold-out table. I was like kind of shocked. I was like, "What the heck just happened?" I got punched at a monastery at a philosophy conference.
Yeah, I don't think many people can say that.
True story. I won't say the person because we did end up. He did apologize the next day, so I was this close to just leaving, and Father Hans was like, "Just let it go." And guys are good like this. Like guys can, punch each other and then be like, "All right, we're cool." So all is forgiven. I don't have any anger towards that guy. We had a great conversation the next night when he apologized. Everything's cool. So, but it is a funny story, and then I think that guy wanted to, but there have been several. So Bryson Gray wanted to do MMA match. Brent Doherty said he wanted to fight, and then somebody else wanted to fight. I don't remember who, but I mean, to me, that's just silly because I mean, who's actually gonna? I'm not an MMA guy. I would probably get my ass beat. So you're probably gonna beat me up, but if you try to fight me, I would probably am winning the debate. So
there you go. One of the cross exams I enjoyed the most was, of course, Tim Gordon. You had like 3 debates back to back in the same night. But when you were talking about the portion when you were discussing the filioque, I counted, and I don't remember the number.
I remember you
offhand.
counting. That was funny.
Yes, you asked him, who does the spirit spirate for like 40 times or something.
I didn't realize in the midst of asking that for him, spiration doesn't mean what we mean. So like when he would say the spirit spirates, for us, that's causal.
Right.
So the Father as the cause, right, is the cause of the generation of the Son. And so if the Spirit is spirating, who is he causing? What does that mean? So for him, they have this scholastic weird idea of passive spiration, which is I don't even know what that is, but it's not Cappadocian. It's not, Constantinople 1. So it's just nonsense. But yeah, I remember after watching your stream where you counted all of that, I finally realized, I was like, so he just doesn't even think of it causally. It's like some other thing. It's weird.
Yeah. Well, I think that like that whole scholastic notion of the Trinity, right, is flawed at its very basis, because they put like nature and essence ahead of person, where for us it begins with the person of the Father.
Yeah, it just ends up being essentially a philosophical formulation.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we don't have philosophical formulations. I'm saying that it begins with this philosophical formulation and metaphysical dogma. And I think for us, the metaphysical dogma is conditioned by divine revelation. For them, the metaphysical dogma conditions the divine revelation.